Welcome. Thank you for joining our CRM Best Practice Series webinar. I'm Becky Melody, your hostess for today's presentation. Larry Isaacson, CRM Practice Director, will be presenting. The discussion today will cover introductions, webinar logistics, and our discussion topic, how transformations in medical device field service management strategy affect regulatory compliance. The USDM team is proud to have Larry in a leadership role. He offers over 20 years in the application of GxP compliance IT technology in life science organizations. Larry has experience in manufacturing, software development, and clinical and laboratory contract service management environments. In addition, he recently led the implementation and validation of FDA-regulated global ERP, laboratory, and quality management systems. He has experience in establishing IT and quality strategy, project, and change management programs. Larry has held the position of Director of IT in pharma, biotech, and medical device companies, and he holds an MS in pharmaceutical research sciences. USDM is focused exclusively on the life science domain. We're the market leader in providing quality and regulatory IT compliance professional service solutions. We're headquartered in Ventura, California, and we've delivered more than 1,000 successful projects with over 200 life science clients. We offer hands-on experience in assisting clients under regulatory distress. We're the market leader in providing validation accelerator packs. Our various dedicated practices include IT and virtualization, quality and auditing, ECM, ERP, PLM, enterprise quality management, manufacturing automation and equipment, clinical and drug safety, business intelligence, project management, GRC, and our laboratory practice, which includes both systems and equipment. In addition, we have SMEs on board to support compliance in the nutraceutical industry. The content today will be covered in approximately 30 minutes, and then we'll invite you to post questions for our team via the iLink message board, which you'll find on the lower left of your screen. Or you can join the discussion on our LinkedIn group and post any questions there. If your questions happen to be of a confidential nature, feel free to shoot us a note after the fact at USDM.com. Now I'll turn the presentation over to Larry.
Thanks, Becky. Thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to address a very interesting topic that's rapidly emerging as a mainstream issue within the customer relationship management domain. CRM systems have been used widely throughout the life sciences industry, but very recently have become applied to field service due to a number of ISVs out there creating dedicated field service systems based on CRM platforms. And this is very timely because what's happening is the field service area is undergoing a major transformation. So what we're going to do is describe the drivers causing the transformation in field service operations in the medical device industry and what regulatory risk comes along with these changes and the areas that you need to consider as you approach the deployment of these field service systems from a compliance perspective, as well as from an IT perspective, and how you can best mitigate the risks and become more proactive instead of reactive in this area, since we've seen a good number of clients have difficulty coming up the curve after the fact, and it's best to get ahead of the curve on this. And then we'll have a summary. So the whole medical device industry has been under a lot of pressure over the last 6 or 7 years that are really coming to the fore now. And as a result, these pressures have been changing the role of the field service function in enterprises. Some of these pressures involve most prominently recently the increased clinical and regulatory standards that are changing, and that's very well indicated by the longer time frame it takes to get a 510K approved by the FDA. It's increased from an average of 90 days, which is typically expected, to more than 140 days in many cases, and for some categories even 190 days. And the total volume of approvals has been reduced on a yearly basis. And this is being compounded by the fact that companies are having increased R&D expenses, partially due to the increased sophistication of these the testing assays that are being implemented by these instruments, along with many of the other demands. And then the reduction in reimbursements pressure from insurance companies and Medicare is lowering the total revenue opportunities for many customers of medical device companies, and so they're not as well positioned to invest in capital investments for new equipment. And then for the leased equipment, they tend to have much smaller margins on their assays. The complexity of medical equipment and devices is increasing in terms of the complexity of the assays and the use of biotechnology and protein-based chemistry. While the actual electronics are becoming simpler in terms of the total number of parts, each of those parts is much more sophisticated and complex, and the cost of service and the sophistication of the service technicians needs to be increasing. The customer base with all these pressures on them is more demanding, and it's becoming more diverse as well, as more organizations are getting involved with this type of testing. The increased competition in terms of a larger number of startups in this area is reducing margins for companies, and consolidation is creating confusion in the industry among customers because it's eroding customer loyalty as organizations change and morph and product lines come and go. And along with that, there is a small but growing trend of the migration of some testing to home-based testing, so they're not being done by instruments and laboratories to the same degree. And while there are opportunities to also market home-based tests, often it's not the same type of industry that it's been in the past. So overall, you're seeing, by some measures, by some studies, by Pricewaterhouse is most prominent, it's quoted, reduced industry revenue growth over the last 6 years ending in 2011 by up to 12%. And by some other studies, it's basically been flat, depending on how you calculate it. So this is obviously a big shock to the industry in which greater and greater investment is required to keep current with technology. So what you see here graphically is that all these pressures, when you put them all together, are definitely going to continue to push down on industry revenue potential if something isn't done, and profitability along with it. So the industry has started responding in a big way. And one of the biggest ways they've been handling that is looking for new revenue sources within their organizations. And field service is an opportunity that's been there for some time and has traditionally sort of been taken for granted as just a support mechanism for and a cost center for product sales and against revenue. However, now there's a realization that this can become a profit center in its own right. So as a result of that, we're starting to see the emphasis on a more compelling value proposition. So they want to go out to the customer base with a lot better case for the value that comes along with field service, and they want that to result in upfront contract commitments and customer retentions so that they can get more revenue from contracts, which really are a major revenue source. As a result, they're seeking that for engineers to actually take a more aggressive role in helping identify opportunities and building that relationship. Often the salespeople, are looked at askance by customers, but their trust really is in the engineer who comes in and is supposed to shoot straight with them about what the issue is. So they're looking for the engineer to build on that relationship and to help with the sales process. There have been a lot of restructuring going on where there's been dedicated sales and service teams, which weren't the case before, even to the point of outsourcing some of these functions for greater efficiency with mixed results, depending upon the type of organization and the regional reach of the instrument itself and the products that are being marketed. But this has been creating a lot of a change within the industry. The pressure to reduce costs obviously is there, and that's being done through trying to engineer fewer site visits, use of remote diagnostics, and lower inventory carrying costs through a variety of techniques. The use of service metrics is going up so that they understand what's happening in the field in real time against the SLAs that are committed to in contracts and warranties. And very pivotally is having the call centers that take calls from customers be able to deliver first call resolution so that they can avoid sending service technicians out if it's not absolutely necessary. And there's often the case where it's simply user education or user error that they're hoping to be uncovered on the phone versus actually sending a tech out. And then from a major compliance perspective, there's a lot of activity in the product complaint resolution area. FDA has become more strict about how you need to document every type of complaint that comes from the field, and trying to triage these complaints into product complaints versus just customer complaints is very important, and then processing the paperwork efficiently and to close that complaint is a very critical process. So not surprisingly, IT is being looked at to make this all happen in a very substantial way, and we're seeing a major shift to invest in this area, which has been very fragmented in the past. So we've talked about the changing role of field service in the past, and this is a model that we use to look at the typical medical device or life science enterprise. We break it down into the R&D phase, where you've got a diagnostic or therapeutic target that you submit a request for marketing for a solution for. And then you're basically in the sales cycle after that approval, where you're turning prospects into customers, where you're depending upon the CRM system very prominently in that process. Once a sale is made, you've got your order-to-cash processing, where your ERP system has traditionally been the mainstay, accompanied by your CAPA systems and quality management systems to manage the incidents that come out of that process, along with your supporting IT systems down here to support everything above. So this model has been changing in the last 5 years, where CRM has migrated from just a sales tool into a full-fledged extension of the ERP system, where customer issues are being managed, as well as from a stock perspective, order processing, actual resolution and delivery of inventory, and all sorts of requests that come through the CRM system are being managed and flowing into the ERP system. And now, more recently, in terms of the radar, has shifted to now involve the recognition that the repair process and the inventory, the actual installation process, and the qualification of those instruments in the field upon delivery is a critical part of the cycle that needs to be tracked in the ERP system, as well as with field service systems. So field service management now is its own key process that is linked closely to ERP and customer support and order processing, along with, in some cases, the quality management system. And there's some substantial implications for this change. And what's also been interesting along with this is the recent recognition of the significance of the compliance requirements that come along with field service. While this has been done manually and handled manually in terms of record keeping by many companies over the years, the migration to full-fledged systems to support this has brought the QA function in, and the very clear recognition that there are substantial compliance requirements in this domain that reside not just in the ERP system, but in the field service system as a system of record. Your requirement is for the service history data collection to be maintained, And this is the regulatory requirement, and this is the reference in the CFR Part 820 for a medical device company that needs to be adhered to. So service history data, installation and verification of parts and devices need to be tracked for proper installation. Installation verification has to be maintained. Any issues once that device is in the field has to be tracked as well. And the service history data collection is required to be maintained. So these are the strategies that are being utilized to address all these changes. And with them come a substantial number of new compliance issues. The use of off-the-shelf field service systems, which can be either on-premises or cloud-based, is replacing ad hoc fragmented systems. So it's basically an ERP system for field service when you look at these systems. And they come along with all of the typical requirements that an ERP system comes with in terms of validation and integration and management and administration. The integration of the field service systems to ERP, complaint management, and other transaction systems, even adverse event systems, brings along with it substantial compliance requirements and considerations from an IT perspective. And also the use of integrated instrument-based diagnostic systems and the integration with headquarters system to support predictive service is a major new wrinkle that is complicating matters in terms of doing an installation qualification. So through these systems, the manufacturer can anticipate service needs for an instrument and determine if things are going awry ahead of something, significant happening in the field where they have to deal with a customer complaint. Very importantly is the use of formal business intelligence systems and analytics systems to now manage and capture a lot of this information coming from these systems in order to determine how they should structure contracts, how they should structure their field service activities, how they can be more efficient and meet their SLAs. Training management systems are critical because the engineers are becoming much more sophisticated in their need to understand instruments, as well as there are substantial compliance requirements along with demonstrating that they're trained on each new innovation that comes along. And also, in order to develop more of a team spirit within the field service organization, there's the adoption of informal communication tools and social media, which come with their own risks if they're not used properly. So overall, these initiatives are excellent and are achieving very good results for field service and for customers, but it comes with a heightened risk that we're not seeing well addressed early on in the process. So what we want to do is talk a little bit about each of these strategies, the risks that come along with them, and the mitigation that you can apply here to get ahead of these. So when you're talking about implementing these field service support systems, they come along with formal validation requirements, and that requires investment in process definitions that are, and workflows that are implemented by these systems, new roles that are created, and training that needs to come along with them for the administrators of these systems and in the field. Even new devices are being put out in terms of iPads or other personal computing devices that are being used to process work orders. So there's a whole slew of new technology and network connectivity that's being introduced along with data management issues. When you're using cloud-based systems, that comes with its own set of challenges that need to be managed, and we've had other webinars specifically on that. So what we recommend is that you get ahead of this by developing your requirements very early on. Get the business involved, get a roundtable together, and define the requirements based on, first, the best practices of the vendor that can give you a head start. You can see what people have already been doing with these systems, and then getting validation planning and regulatory cloud assessments in place and getting your SOPs implemented as early as possible, because they will change in association with the implementation of these systems. And we've seen many companies sort of get caught up in delays as a result of not having addressed their SOPs and the implications to the SOPs just about when they were going to roll out the systems. Integrations are very crucial, because as part of implementing these systems, you often are integrating them by definition to your ERP system, where most of this master data for customers, install product, shipments, parts requests, all sorts of transactions are coming through your ERP system potentially, and need to be downloaded or integrated to the field service systems for actual scheduling of people to carry out the various activities in the field. So there are special validation requirements for the interfaces or file transfers, both within your premises if you're integrating them, and then with cloud-based systems, even more stringent ones from a security perspective. So if you're sending your very critical master data out into a cloud-based SaaS system, you've got to make sure that it's secure. So what we recommend is that you have, as early as possible, a definition of the data requirements for the migrations and the interface, and do a system of record analysis. Where is this key data going to be from an audit perspective? And often it's going to be a shared situation where you're going to have it both in the ERP system and the field service system, and maybe even other subsidiary systems. And then for the integration of instrument-based diagnostic systems with your field service systems or with other monitoring or analytics systems, you need to be able to assess the impact of these predictive systems on your compliance position, because there is risk that comes along with these systems if it fails in some way that generates an adverse event. And this is the big concern of most regulatory people, is that if I've got an adverse event, if an instrument is out there doing a life or death assay or is used to determine dosage of a patient, and unbeknownst to the user of the instrument, either due to dependence upon these built-in diagnostic systems based on a contract or some other purpose, that there's an adverse event occurs and the patient is misdosed or is misdiagnosed because of the instrument, you could have a very deep investigation of how that instrument was managed and what the process was and where the risk was, where the cause was. And so to the extent that the people are depending upon these new diagnostic systems and scheduling, automated scheduling, under a system that's the PM schedule is driven by the manufacturer, you need to make sure that these are working properly and that they're properly installed end to end. So this does involve some additional installation qualification responsibility here to make sure that they're being taken into account, which may be beyond what the previous instrument generation required. The analytics we talked about are becoming have a pivotal role in this new model, because it really is what allows people to manage their field service staff, what skills are required, where the higher cost support is going, and also to respond to activities in the field and to manage by exception. Some of these, if decisions are being made for dispatching and managing SLAs in the field, or PMs, could be considered needing to be validated in terms of reports or dashboards. So out of the very large slew of reports and dashboards that come with these systems, you want to identify those that are most critical and that may be GXP or GMP need to be compliant and be validated. As part of the training management, this has always been in place, where you need to show people that they're properly trained and that they're out there working on these systems and keeping them in good repair. Now these systems are becoming more sophisticated and, in fact, are even morphing into expert systems to help technicians do diagnosis in the field and provide solutions to them. So these knowledge-based systems are becoming quite pivotal for technicians. One of the drivers for this is that the customers lose confidence in the field service organization when a technician has to keep calling back to someone else for solutions. So they want to bake this into the systems as much as possible. Use of iPads to be able to access this information, or expert systems on the iPads to help them walk through a diagnostic process is becoming very pivotal. And by the same token, you have to make sure that those systems are working properly and providing the right perspectives and solutions. Social media systems to allow people to collaborate using their computers or handheld devices are very, very useful. However, you have to be careful of their use in terms of if they're talking about a problem at a particular customer site that might lead to, have led to an adverse event or a customer complaint. People need to be circumspect as to how much data they're putting in to the social media system and the security around these systems and who can access it. So that needs to be kept in mind when you're rolling these types of systems out, dedicated for field service activities that are pretty sensitive. Wanted to talk briefly about system of record considerations. Very frequently, the field service systems have been the poor cousin to the ERP system and have been second stringers, and that is now changing. But at the same time, people are still downplaying the risks associated with mismanagement of a field service system, saying the ERP system is primary or the system of record, or the customer complaint system is, or the adverse event system is. And we have to keep in mind that there are two factors here. One is if the CRM system or your field service system is a conduit for this information to the system of record, then the validation of that system and its proper operation is just as critical to the integrity of that data as the system of record. And if it's the weak link, you can't really depend on the system of record, whether that be ERP or adverse event, to have good data in it or complete data. So you can't downplay the importance of the validation comprehensiveness necessary in these systems, given that this kind of information is coming across, especially customer complaints, which can morph into adverse events, which end up going into your quality management system, either of which do. And then, of course, these CRM / field service systems are themselves holding unique data that don't travel to other systems. From a traceability perspective, while the ERP system may have a lot of information about parts that were ordered for a machine to fix it in the field, the initial install of the part, of course, itself, there are a lot of things happening in the field that are under the radar of the ERP system. The context of why a part was changed, if a technician is taking stock from their trunk stock, as they call it, or another depot that is not a primary depot, we don't know if that has been reflected in the ERP system. It may only be reflected in the field service system, which in its own right has parts order capability and parts receipt capability and parts request capabilities in many cases. So you've got a little mini ERP system from an inventory management perspective in that field service system if it's being used fully. And you've got to look at that as a system of record for a lot of field transactions that may not be reflected anywhere else. And at the very least, it should be assessed. And not to forget the interfaces and the integrations that come along inherently with these field service systems for them to operate, whether that be data migration and data population to transactions, need to be very heavily tested. The challenge when you're talking about integration is that you've got your internal GXP system, which could be your ERP system, it could be your adverse event system. This could actually be now more and more another cloud system or outsourced SaaS system talking to your field service system, which may or may not be in a cloud. And you've got multiple API or other integration techniques that you can choose from or that may come with your system that need to be bridged to allow your master data to flow, for transactions to flow back and forth. You may be using file transfer. You may be using incremental updates. You could be using real-time interfaces. All of this needs to be assessed because you've got an IT SLA gap in terms of how your IT organization is supporting this, who's responsible, your GMP compliance gap in terms of which QA group is worrying about which aspect of the system, and how do I manage these interfaces. And then, more significantly, auditability. The transaction logs in one system and the transaction logs in the other system need to be complemented by some type of record in the interface to know that the transactions actually got from one place to another, or what the state was of these systems in case of a failure, which is not uncommon. If your network goes down in between a file transfer or a transaction, you need to know if a transaction is here, but it didn't get here. What was the reason? Did the interface ever see it? You know, where did the data go? If it never got there, how do I repeat that transmission? How do I sync these two environments? So this kind of analysis needs to be done very early to demonstrate that you have integrity, not just for compliance purposes, but for business purposes. And since there are often multiple interfaces involved with some of these systems to multiple systems of record that could be validated, this really has to be well understood by IT and QA. So overall, what we're shooting for is these solutions, from the integrated IT suites to your analyticals to predictive diagnostic, your advanced compliance assessments, designed for serviceability, where instruments are becoming not just smarter in terms of anticipating service, but also being more easily serviced in the field, coupled with their CRM knowledge bases and the organizational realignment and training management and expert systems are going to increase field service revenue and profits and support the medical device industry position overall. And we are actually seeing that already. There's some really big success stories that were told at a recent field service medical conference that I participated in. So in summary, what we see is the field service management is undergoing a transformation in many, many critical dimensions, and it's creating a real sea change, compounded by outsourcing. And the outsourcing brings into it other people's systems that you need to worry about in terms of how it's feeding your system if you're the manufacturer. So this complexity needs to be managed. And it's being managed through aggressive IT investment and tools and processes realignment. So what we have been seeing is that people have been slow to meet these challenges. They've sort of creeped up on people. They get very excited about this in terms of the transformation itself and its potential, but slow to see the big picture in terms of all the specific initiatives and how they have to come together. And with integration, there's a high degree of interdependence. So you couple that with the focus on maintaining instrument operational suitability, part of which is the manufacturer's responsibility, especially during warranty periods or under contracts, could result in some regulatory liability in the case of an adverse event related to a customer complaint or some other type of system failure. So there have to be very well-defined scripts and understandings as to where that liability lies and how you're mitigating it. And a large part of that is done through the validation process. The analytical dashboards, which become the means to operate this new model and to manage in a leaner environment, is dependent upon understanding the regulatory role of these tools and the training associated with them to make sure people are using them properly. If decisions are being made based on these systems that are critical to the operation and maintenance of the customer instruments. And this is where USDM can has helped and can continue to help any client with quickly assessing what the implications of these initiatives are and how to best manage them so you're not redoing or reinventing the wheel. So we look forward to your inquiries regarding this area. And with that, I'll turn it over to Becky for questions.
Thanks so much, Larry. Appreciate the good information there. While you're typing your questions in, I'd like to let you know that this webinar has been recorded and will be available on our website, USDM.com. Okay, looks like we have our first question from John. says, why is this change in IT investment in field service happening so suddenly?
Yeah, it seems that the revenue impacts that we were talking about earlier in the industry have been addressed in all the other ways that companies typically can, through acquisitions, consolidations, the typical types of reorganizations and trying to streamline things on the operational side. But it was only recently that it was the role of field service historically had been such an engineering domain that it was simply looked at as a cost center and something that needs to be out there. It's not a nice to have, you have to have it, but it wasn't considered an area that you want to make money from per se. At least generally. Now, certainly the field service people have seen that potential, but it was not a priority in terms of investment because all the investment went into R&D for new devices, new products, and dealing with the revenue side, the revenue generating side on the product development side, because these are manufacturers and developers of new products. So field service now, I think, was the last domain that they could start to see revenue potential, and for some of the most proactive and innovative companies, they were on this years ago. But now it seems to be a strong trend in this area, and the uptake of IT or assets needed to make it happen is being done quite aggressively. And I think the availability of cloud systems and more mature applications out there specifically tailored to field service operations has also enabled. And then there are a lot of third parties out there that have specialized in this, that have developed their own sophisticated models and systems. All have come together to make this very viable and visible.
Thank you, Larry. Okay, the next question is from Aditya. He says, our company is implementing a cloud-based system, but the interfaces are not scoped out yet. What is the best approach?
Well, the question will be based on, how far along are you with the cloud-based system. And what I often see is that companies start, one part of the company that gets very excited about this and learns about a system, starts running full, or maybe you have something like Salesforce already, and you've discovered that there's a field service, a number of field service systems like ServiceMax out there that you can adopt on top of the investment you've already made in Salesforce. People are rushing out in a big way on their own to start adapting it, and then late in the process they turn around and say, oh yeah, we've got to populate this information into this new system. It's not something that's the front of their mind, and then they start looking at the ERP systems and the rest of it and turning to IT. And obviously that's not the best approach. Due diligence is very important. So any business person who is interested in moving in this direction needs to engage with their IT and QA groups early on and indicate that this is an initiative. And there isn't any real question these days that this is the way things are going. The ad hoc systems that people have been living with in this area have just not served them well. And when you start to look at these systems and what they can bring with the right investment of planning and data management, it's very compelling. So you need to get ahead of it. The best approach is to look at the solutions out there, develop a steering committee, and get the IT people involved to understand what are these target systems going to require in terms of information, and what kinds of interfaces is the vendor able to support. If you're going to host it internally, it's a much simpler process, but you need to establish ground rules for that very early on.
Great. Okay, next question is from Frank. Says, we are using Salesforce.com, but my VP wants to develop a custom field service system because it's cheaper. Is that correct?
Well, there are a number of cases where we've come in after the fact for people who have developed their own systems using Salesforce or other platforms in the cloud. And unfortunately, they had not taken into account some of the compliance considerations, Part 11 considerations, audit trails, etc. and they found it to be much more challenging than they thought. Certainly, it's a good way to get started if you're really up against the wall, but we don't recommend that. We recommend that you look at a package solution because there are so many dependencies to do field service properly, depending on your business and your model. But there's a certain core set of functions that need to be there, and they need to be integrated, and interdependencies need to be addressed. But if you're starting fresh from scratch, you're reinventing the wheel in many respects. And while it may look cheaper, you end up owning the entire kit and caboodle, the maintenance, the compliance, and as a custom system, it's a higher risk compliance scenario requiring more comprehensive validation, and you're all out of there on your own. So while from a pure capital budget perspective, it may look cheaper because you may already have Salesforce, the reality is the total cost of ownership is what people want to look at in terms of one approach or the other. And there are a lot of we can help you understand why this would be a much more expensive venture. Unless you're looking for a very quick and dirty prototype, that might be a way to go to help to define your requirements. But the danger is once you start down that road, it keeps building and building, and you end up owning a monster. And believe me, we've come in and cleaned up on many situations that has been the case. And that's why people are turning to these cloud-based solutions. So we certainly would recommend doing a very thorough assessment before you go down that road.
Okay. Next question is from Kathleen. How do I find out about the instrument-based diagnostics systems and their impact on installation qualification?
Well, this is an interesting area because this requires a lot of insight into the engineering side of the equation. And this process starts early on in the development cycle these days. So predictive diagnostics and monitoring is very compelling because while this instrument in the past, the model was the instrument sits out there by itself. It's basically managed remotely or managed remotely in terms of either dispatching people or using the customer with their hands-on capability to find out what's wrong with the system before you dispatch someone. Now the instrument is going to be able to network full-time with headquarters and can be monitored through specialized field service systems on an ongoing basis, or in some models will occasionally transmit key information back to the headquarters, which can then be used to determine its state and its need for service. So obviously these systems need to be checked out during installation, as well as the fact that their ongoing operation needs to be assured to the extent that these are possibly being fed into the field service management system. So hopefully the engineers are talking to the field service organization as to how these things are being adopted and designed, and it will be one of the natural interfaces you need to be able to go out and validate. So I would first of all contact the field service business. Hopefully has been involved with this, but if not, the engineering and product development groups have to be engaged. Usually the best way to do that is a process where these things are now in the introduction stage and have been proposed and they're coming to fruition. There needs to be some type of roundtable forum that people become aware of these features. And then you can incorporate them into your qualification planning.
Thank you. Okay, time for one more question. It's from Manjira. So how much revenue are these strategies in FSM predicted to increase?
Well, I think everybody's sort of closed-mouthed about how much money they've actually been making from this or what the impact has been. And I don't know that it's that easy to isolate for analysis, but certainly in many companies they've reported between a 10% and a 15% improvement in field service revenues, and some of them have actually indicated a lot higher than that in terms of revenues. And more importantly, profitability has been increased since companies have actually moved to measuring profitability, which wasn't the case before. So the amount of pleasure that was indicated by those companies that didn't quantify it was quite palpable. But people are being a little more closed-mouthed about specific numbers. But at the very least, it's arrested, and these companies that have taken them on, it's arrested the downtrend that they've been having. And there is a cost to implement this that has to be factored in. So they have made significant investments in reskilling their engineers, in revamping their organizations, and in buying these systems. So obviously, that has to be taken into account. But in terms of actual sale of contracts, and unfortunately I didn't have those numbers right in front of me, but I did have some quotes at this conference that talked about substantial changes in their ability to capture contract sales at the conclusion of warranties, or do conversions as they call them, from warranty to contract, has gone up substantially, and if memory serves, some of them even said 50%. So a substantial impact on their ability to add value to the customer. The customer now can even go onto dashboards and see their own instrument history and their inventories and things like that. So the IT investment has been making a big difference in how engaged customers are with their own service process and with their engineers.
Thank you, Larry. Appreciate your good answers there, and thank you all for participating there with your good questions. I would want to thank you for attending, and I'd like to encourage you to visit the USDM website. You can review upcoming webinars there, as well as events, and take a look at the list of recorded sessions. We have about 50 or 60 previously presented webinars that might be useful for your IT or QA or MedDev teams there. Feel free to take a look. Our next scheduled webinar, as an example, is sponsored by the USDM Quality and Auditing Project Management Practice. It's titled PAI Readiness in the Life Sciences, an FDA Perspective. The session will be presented by Kevin Foley. He's an ex-FDA compliance auditor who recently joined the USDM team, and you can join us for that session on May 9th. We invite you to join the USDM LinkedIn group page. There will be a discussion there around today's webinar, and you can stay in touch around upcoming events and presentations there as well. We'd love to get your feedback. Let us know we're on the right track with your suggestions or input there, and also let us know if you have a topic that you're struggling, a pain point that we can help you address from a compliance standpoint. Let us know. We'll be happy to see what we can do there. Thank you again, Larry, for presenting. Thank you all for taking the time to join us. We do appreciate the opportunity to team with you in working towards excellence in compliance. Have a great day, everybody.